Good afternoon, listeners. I am Barbara Askins, President and CEO of the 125th Street Business Improvement District. Welcome to 125 and Beyond. 125th Street and Beyond is a show about the work we do here at the 125th Street Business Improvement District here in Harlem. It is also a show about relationships we are building with city agencies, with other bids from around the world, and our neighbors here in Harlem. We will be giving updates on what's happening and addressing issues that impact 125th Street Commercial District. So what's new on 125th Street? Today, we take a deeper dive into what is happening with retail. A month ago, several news publications wrote stories about the amount of vacancies that are happening throughout the city, and that included Harlem. And they mentioned about 30 to 35 businesses, empty spaces on 125th Street. And I myself, as a practitioner, look at particularly when counting the vacancies, you look at what's vacant and available, what's vacant and not available, and what's going on with the development projects. And that's what's been happening here for 125th Street. Empty storefronts are becoming a part of the landscape, but recent announcements for us include Sephora, Pandora, Target, and Trader Joe's. And so others are coming. Today, we have a very special guest, someone who has been working with the 125th Street bid for now between 15 and 20 years on real estate. Her name is Maureen Atkinson from the J.C. Williams Group. Welcome, Maureen, for coming on to share some of the things that we've been doing here on 125th Street.
Great to be here. Yeah, love it.
J.C. Williams is a company with retail consultants that are specializing in customer-centric strategies, market research, branding and marketing, retail operations, real estate master planning, and food services. Maureen is a senior advisor for research and insights. Maureen has extensive experience in retail research. She has done work in cities all over the world, and 125th Street has been a client for over 2 decades. We reached out to Maureen immediately during COVID to get a better understanding of what was happening to us based on her global experience, seeking for recommendation for charting these waters that we're in. Maureen and I talked extensively about the impact of online shopping. We looked at data that we had been tracking since 2015, and with her understanding of the strengths and the opportunities for 125th Street, we thought this was a great time for us to not only look at the impacts, but also to help guide us through these troubled times. So thank you, Maureen, for joining us. And before we begin, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, where you came from, how did you get into this field, all those lovely things about our industry.
Okay, it's great. First of all, it's great to be here, Barbara. I really thank you very much for including me on your show. It's wonderful to be asked. So I was born and raised in Toronto, Canada, and a very kind of sort of unremarkable childhood. But one of the things that I really did do and what got me into retail is as soon as I was able to work, I started working in retail. And so I started working first in a local bakery and then went on to work in a department store that was downtown. And so when I graduated after college, I was looking around. I'd taken business and I really was wondering what I was going to do. And I ended up working for a large department store chain, a Canadian department store chain. And it was a very good experience because I got to do when you work in a store like that, you get to do lots of different jobs. So I ran sales departments. I was a buyer for a while, and I also was in market research. But I really loved the market research side of it. So I explored that even further. So when I left the company, I looked around and I joined JC Williams Group, which was focused on strategy, but wasn't strong in research. And so they looked to me to kind of run their research area. And so that's how I got into it. And we work for retailers, but we love our work in downtowns because that's where our heart is. So anyway,
So
that's it.
research, which is very interesting because that's how we met, at the International Downtown Association. And prior to meeting you, I really didn't understand the importance and the need of research in placemaking and retail recruitment and retention, those type things. And it wasn't actually until I was chair of the IDA, the International Downtown Association, with your support, thank you very much, that we created the first research committee. And you were on that committee with others from around. And at that particular point, then almost all of us who were in downtown management start looking closer at research. And so for a small area like ours, 125th Street, like the larger downtowns and the larger BS, they do research with a part of their strategies. But we were lucky enough to have a grant, and we were able to bring you in to 125th Street early on. So the question is, why do people seek your services? And what is it? I mean, what is the importance of the research and the strategy as it fits into placemaking for practitioners like myself?
Well, the thing about retail is that retail is always changing. And so while we think about, and retail changes because customers change, and things, outside events really change customers. Sometimes it improves their lives, sometimes it doesn't, but they're always changing. And so retail has to change and evolve to make sure that they serve, because the purpose of retail is to serve customers. So it's really understanding that. And I think that in placemaking, it serves the same function because while we think of Harlem in a certain way, Harlem is evolving. Every day it changes. And so, it's really important to be on top of that and to really understand it.
That brings the challenges, because COVID brought a lot of challenges, and everyone was basically functioning at the moment. We really didn't even have time to do research. But another thing that you do is you follow trends and stuff. And so looking at where we are now, post-COVID, what type of trends do you see happening, across the country as people move? We're getting some relief. People are moving out of, the hardships from COVID.
So I think, and obviously I'm reflecting changes in retail because that's really, there's huge changes in everything, but in retail, because that's my emphasis, certainly the online and what changed through COVID was that people had to buy online because oftentimes they couldn't be in stores, and stores had to sell online because oftentimes they couldn't operate their stores and have customers in. Customers have gotten used to that. And while we are definitely, another trend is people are definitely coming back to stores. They're definitely loving the social interaction, but they really do want to have the opportunity to buy however they want to buy. And so that's why online is really important, even for small retailers. And I know a lot of smaller retailers say, oh, that's fine, it's too expensive, but there are ways to get into it. So that's really very important. And I think with retailers themselves, a lot of stores closed through COVID. Some of them went out of business, or they downsized their chains and closed stores. So the vacancies that Harlem, or that 125th Street experienced, was a national issue, not just a local issue. And I think it's really important for the media to reflect that, because some of the stores that closed went out of business, and so, but now they're opening them, and now they've started reopening stores. They tend to be smaller, so we're not seeing these giant sized stores, but definitely they're reaching out and opening, so that's a good thing. And I think beyond that, there's issues like finding staff, dealing with inflation. Retailers have to stay on top of it in order to, because their prices are going up. And then obviously the issue of safety. They're all challenges for retailers. So anyway, sorry, that was a long answer to a shorter question, but
it was it was a sort of a long question as well. So, but let's step back in time for when I first met you at the International Downtown Association conference. They have a marketplace, and where those of us who are practitioners are always seeking and looking for things to help us do the work we're doing. And you were doing those reports, and I remember saying to you that we were trying to find a way to expand the business improvement district, to get more into retail retention and recruitment. But for Harlem, we always have to deal with the social impacts and the social engagement as well, and community engagement. And I liked your approach because you said that you do a set price and then you stick with the job until it gets done. And so you didn't understand all the challenges we had, but that was music to my ears, because I didn't want to start and stop the project. So the community engagement piece was huge, that you incorporated into us determining what type of stores to bring to 125th Street, surveys, on the street, intercept, community meetings, engagements, one-on-one. Can you explain why, or let our listeners know why it's so important for this community engagement piece when you looking at what type of retail a community should have?
So our philosophy is that the best and the most successful commercial districts, like 125th Street, have to reflect the community they're in. There's no sense in us having this, magic picture and trying to impose that, because that's not going to appeal to the people there. And the other thing is, it's not going to be what will be implemented. So it was very important, I think, for us to really reach out and involve people, because everybody, you do a lot of what you do, but you really depend on those people, those community leaders, and also just when we do the surveys, it's really understanding the person who's on the street and why are they there and what do they love about it? And those are the things that you want to make sure that you really reinforce. And what are the issues that they see? So that when you are developing your plans, it's really a reflection of the community. So we bring what are the trends internationally, but we really also have to understand, how does that apply? How does that apply to 125th Street to make you more successful?
Right. And the part that was really remarkable, because we ourselves had never looked at it that way. When you look at 125th Street from river to river, you saw that it was three distinct districts. And with those three distinct districts, it was from the river over to Morningside, which was, you saw the West District, and then from Morningside to Fifth Central, and from Fifth to over to the Triborough Bridge area. First Avenue was the Eastern District, and each had a different market. We know that they have different elected officials, different community people, but looking at it from retail, the Western end was college centric, collegiate centric. And when we start checking it out that way, that's when we realized the retail mix had to be different and stuff. So I want you to just, enlighten why that was so important, because then you came back and said you need to focus on the central, grow the central first and then expand out. Right. That was your recommendation.
Exactly. And I think that it's like anything, that was certainly, the central was certainly the powerhouse, and where some of those key elements of what 125th Street is, were there. And so I think that's important. One of the reasons why breaking it down is also important is because there's almost no customer that is going to walk right across 125th Street. It's a very long district. It's wonderful. And it's wonderful to have those districts within 125th Street. But it's important to recognize them and have a function for each of them. So the Central District, I think we started with, and we wanted to reflect that as being the clear downtown, has the central offices, it has the Apollo and places like that. So it's really it was important to really focus at the beginning there.
Yes, and then you came out with some recommendations or things to take a closer look at. One was double loaded retail is the strongest, because we do have an area where we only have single loaded retail. Then concentration breeds power. That was another thing that you observed, and which was in the central core, the concentration, the central core, and commercial follow residential. And I pulled those out because we still have that single loaded area over there between Morningside and Amsterdam, because of the public housing that is significant, and we understand that it breeds the retail, but it also makes that area a weaker retail district. And we're still struggling, trying to figure out how to incorporate it in the mix. The other thing is Columbia has expanded since that time. So now we have 4 sections. You have the section with Columbia, then we have the section with the single load retail, then you have the concentration, and we now have residential coming. I throw all that at you to just get your immediate response to what's, now look at where do we go from here.
Yeah, and I think double loaded retail is ideal, it's sort of a kind of basic function. I mean, if you go back to markets, you know, Middle East markets or any kind of old retail, you'll see that they had hallways, they had people on both sides, you know, selling things. And so that does follow through into streets. And so it is important, and that's why malls are designed the way they're designed. But doesn't mean that single loaded retail can't have a function. So I just wanted to kind of say that because, you know, but it may not have the kind of central function that your core area will have. It might be more convenience, you know, and that kind of thing. But concentrating retail, it does make it more powerful. And that's why having those districts where you really have a function for them is important. And then obviously residential, the more people you have to buy things, the better off you will be. There's no getting around that. And that's something we're seeing more and more of as well, to support retail. People walking by are much more powerful than because they're there every day. And they will be your harshest critics and your best advocates. So, you know, so good and bad about it, but they are the ones you really want.
So, but going back to this single loaded retail, because just today I was talking to someone who was saying we have to get 125th Street to function from river to river. And as you know, from Amsterdam Avenue over to Morningside, not only is it single loaded retail, the street takes a crazy kind of angle and trying to figure out how to make one, like people will get to Amsterdam and then turn and go the other way. I mean, everybody's talking about rebuilding the public realm now and coming up with creative ways to activate spaces. But that area is very challenging, and we had you to start working on it many years ago. Have you come up with any suggestions? I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, I think the reality is, you know, it's a bit of what I said. You're just, you know, having people walk from river to river, I think is an unreasonable expectation, because it's such a long distance. So I think it's, yes, you want people to experience it river to river, but they're not going to do it in the same, you know, the same trip of being there. And so, but that crazy kind of S shape and things, you know, I mean, in the end, it's a problem, but it's a very unique identifying part of what 125th Street is. You know,
Right.
125th Street is not a mall. It's not a uniform kind of, you know, boring place to be. It is its own animal.
Yes, yes, it is its own animal, and it's alive. And so, but when you say people are not going to walk, so I think about, because we have been through many cities together, and when we go to Chicago and we stay over there in that Palmer Hotel, we walk across that bridge. It takes us a long time to get over there to that Millennium Park and stuff, but we do it, you know. And I think it comes down to having those attractions that people want to come to. And so that takes into the conversation of the arts and culture. And one of the reasons we push for that cultural destination. The idea situation is to have cultural uses in every block that make people want to, if not go through all of it, but go through some of it and stuff. And that's where we're lacking. You know, that that one destination that draw and pull people, the masses of people on a regular basis. And what that can be, I'm not sure. I think we'll be coming back to you on that. And so bringing you up to date, the Apollo is adding 2 more theaters in the new Victoria Theater. The Studio Museum is rebuilding their building. The National Black Theater is rebuilding their building, as well as we're getting the Urban League is bringing the Civil Rights Museum. So that's 4 different cultural entities. But again, it's in the central core. And there are other cultural uses, that are smaller, but connecting those cultural uses. That's what I want you to talk about a little bit, to try to guide that foot traffic that we have, giving them somewhere to go.
Yeah, and I think, the cultural, I love the idea of this cultural, using that cultural focus for 125th Street, because I think it really creates that uniqueness that that you really want to have, and that is there. I mean, it's unique, but it's authentic, and that is really, I think, the key, because there's no sense in being kind of a Disneyland. You really want to make sure that what you have really, speaks to what 125th Street is. And the having places, they may not be the big attractions like the Apollo, but they could be things like places for like workshops, so where people can be more involved in, taking painting lessons or taking dance lessons, those kinds of things. They may be the things that are more appropriate in some of these other in not necessarily in the central core, but they will be attractions, both for people are going to experience that, but then also they will have shows, they will have workshops and things like that for people too. So culture as a law is a very big tent, I guess, or umbrella, that it can be.
Well, it does, and it also has the challenges, because I hate to bring up this 4-letter word called rent, R-E-N-T.
Exactly.
That becomes that becomes the issue, particularly for the cultural uses, which is why we came up with the cultural bonus. And as you know, that we could not get performances, like you said, taking painting lessons and stuff. We could not get bonus for production. And I think it's still very needed, and how to make that happen. And again, it comes down to the city and property owners, coming together. We made a little bit of a stab, but what you just said is, again, having multiple uses of culture and complementary businesses is where we should go, and infusing it from a youth perspective, because they are the customer base right now. So before we take a break, Maureen, I'd like to, and when we come back, we're going to start talking about footfall traffic. We're going to talk a little bit about the challenges that deals with the conditions on the street. We're going to talk about the twinning, our global local focus marketing, that type thing. But I'm going to give you the time to kind of summarize what we just finished speaking about, and some words, maybe direction. I'm putting you the word without paying you here right now. So before we go to work here, before we go to break. So what are your last words on the things we just discussed?
Well, I think that it's an ongoing job. It's not, and and that's what makes it exciting. It's ever changing. And so seeing whatever those opportunities are, obviously within Harlem, we just see the history, the culture of Harlem, and the, you know, how that's reflected on 125th Street, this amazing international name that that you have. So you know, I think focusing, being focused about how that can lead to, you know, better service for everybody through retail, you know, and through really making and continuing to make 125th Street that exciting core of the culture and the area. So
you are listening to 125th Street and Beyond 90.3 FM. I am your host, Barbara Askins. We are having a great discussion with Maureen Atkinson, Senior Advisor and Research Insight for JC Williams Group, a global retail consultancy firm. We will be back and to continue our conversation. So welcome back, listeners. You are listening to 125th Street and Beyond on 90.3 FM. I'm your host, Barbara Askins. We are having a great discussion with Maureen Atkinson, Senior Advisor and Research Insights for JC Williams Group, a global retail consultancy. Before the break, Maureen and I spoke about the community engagement approach that she took to use to identify opportunities and threats to retail on 125th Street. Maureen, you recommended that we should build on strengths. And at that time, our strengths were cultural facilities, consumer demand, and 125th Street being a central gathering point. Why did you see these three areas as strength for 125th Street? And right now, since you're studying us again, have you identified any others?
well, I think you know, the issue about being successful in any kind of retail endeavor is to really search out what is unique about the area, and then what is authentic, because there's lots in the you know, there's lots of retail that are in places that are made up. And I think the best thing about communities are that they are authentic, and I think Harlem is authentic and has this amazing rich cultural background. So that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed. Retail is changing, absolutely. And I know that you are reinforcing that amazing cultural heritage that you already have. So you're building on an existing strength, and that is really the best way to be successful.
So fast forward, COVID hit 125th Street as well as the rest of the city. And it was a real major impact for us, but in different ways, because we didn't have hotels, we didn't have lots of restaurants. We had, you know, essential services that were allowed to stay open, but the problems on the street increased with the homelessness and with the drug situation, with the mentally ill. And at that time, no one knew how to deal with these things. And it had an impact on us. Our footfall counts are lower, the pedestrian counts are lower, the vacancy rates are higher than ever, even from the times when we started a long time ago. We're dealing with crime inside the stores and on the streets. You know, we still haven't come up with a workable solution for street vending on 125th Street. And you helped us work on that back in 2015. You know, businesses are seeking new ways to deal with and with the online competition. And the city is also trying to bring in new policies to try to make things happen. And in the midst of all of this, we have development projects that are happening that bring in the arts that you were talking about. So the question is, how do you see these new development projects affecting retail, and particularly like the challenges haven't gone anywhere? And it's a two-part question. And now that we have all this new stuff coming, what should retailers do to position themselves to operate with these changes coming in?
Well, I think with the new, with some of this new development is fantastic. And I know that everything that is on the street that brings more people for more reasons really helps retail. So there's no question about that. And I think that that's what these new developments are doing and they're building on that existing strength. So I think that's the positive side. I think on the side of the challenges with safety and security, and I know it's a big challenge and it has been in the past as well on 125th Street, but safety and security in retail is a challenge across the country. It has become, it has become something that retailers, especially retailers with chains, chain retailers are dealing with on an ongoing basis. So I think it's really understanding that, yeah, you are working on it, but you're working on a problem that is bigger than just 125th Street. And I think in that case, the approach of bringing together, because the bid is not going to solve these problems on their own. The bid needs to be working with partners, and I know that you're doing that. And it together, a lot of these issues, they may not be solved completely, but they certainly are, they can be addressed, but they need to be addressed in partnership with the city, with nonprofits, with the police. Everybody needs to be involved.
So this spring, you just mentioned about these problems across the country, and what about trends? This is something that I learned at the International Downtown Association, of how people in your field of work track the retail trends that are taking place, and they're different in every area. I just met with my colleague from Sweden, and they're doing some very interesting things with clothing made from recyclable goods, and looking at how they can create urban wear with young designers, which sounds so attractive, particularly this time, because it seems as though experiences and differences, is something that is attracting people's attention. So this question is about trends, other trends you have seen. I know you just came back from China, some that may be particularly of interest to 125th Street. It may be something we haven't thought about. Even you can creatively put something together. I'm pushing your brain here at this point.
Well, it's funny because, everybody looks to 125th Street for good ideas, don't they? I mean, it's very interesting to me that, and I think we all learn from each other. I don't think that, and that's what I like about the International Downtown Association, is you have connections with people who are from other countries and other places, so I mean, something that we've seen actually in Italy is this this thing where people adopt a park, and they the city gives them paint, and they, if the paint is peeling on the street furniture, they paint the street furniture. And so that may not work in Harlem, but I think the idea that involving the neighborhood, as to help solve some of the problems, is a really good way of kind of thinking about things. And I mean, I loved your murals. I have to say, I thought the murals were brilliant. And that answered a huge issue.
Yeah, and we still have them. We're looking for a way to display them permanently. These were the expressions that people in the community had after the George Floyd incident, and we gave people a chance to express themselves. And this also bring, again, like,
In a creative way. In a I think that's that was the magic of it.
Yes, you're right, because a lot of people did do murals, but we did bring, I could say, like, we brought the Harlem touch to it, and dropped it in the middle of the business district, and that also led us to the whole thing, which about the twinning. And so one of the twinning is this concept of the 125th Street bid and the Brixton bid coming together to share common, struggles, common challenges, but also common best practices. And one of the things I saw there as it relates to retail that I found so fascinating was a record shop that sold only, the old records. They were selling vinyls. And you would think, who would buy vinyls, enough to pay rent? But they had an interesting concept where at 4 o'clock every day, they brought a DJ in to spin vinyl music. And the people came in and start dancing, and eventually came out into the street, and it became the place to come to hear music. And now it's an attraction that other businesses feed off of. And that goes back to the culture and sharing and learning. So, we're going to IDA in October, and they have a great, it's going to be in Chicago. They have a great thing there with art. And this is bringing me to, again, these trends. I'm asking you, because you got a chance to see more than we do, different trends, different techniques that people are using to activate their streets in other areas. Can you give us a couple examples?
I mean, activating the street obviously is, bringing retail is definitely an important thing. And there is a lot of stuff about a lot of projects around pop-up stores, but doing it right, not doing a kind of feeble attempt at it, because that's really the challenge. But also bringing personalities, maybe personalities from who grew up in the area and have a great feeling for it. It's certainly there are these tastemakers out there who really want to give back to their communities. And I think that Harlem just has this place in people's hearts that I think is amazing, amazingly strong.
So let's dig a little bit more into pop-ups, because pop-ups have been around for quite some time. They're now becoming like a trend. I remember this pop-up, was Sears, JCPenney's one of them, that they put a little pop-up store in Times Square that you can walk up to a computer and buy products and stuff. And pop-ups now, some people see pop-ups as a way of business. Can we just talk a little bit more about pop-ups? Because I'm interested in, is there a way we can integrate pop-ups into 125th Street?
Yeah, and I think there are retailers that only do pop-ups.
Oh,
So there is there's a retailer that does footwear. So the special shoes that are in demand, but they're an online business, but then they will set up pop-ups, and some of them do them only in, you know, at big events. But I think in more and more they're looking at where's our customer for this product, and then where should we be doing specialty pop-ups. And also on the thing of pop-ups, there are businesses that bring pop-ups together, and
oh,
then and then essentially have so that it functions a bit like a department store, in that they specially figure out who is going to be the best for this particular area, and then they bring in these communities. There are so many new online retailers who kind of came out of COVID and can't afford to set up permanent stores, but really want to reach their customers, in a really personal way. So reach them face to face. So
so there could
yeah,
be some
it's
opportunities there.
evolving. You're right.
Yes.
They've been around a long time, and I think everybody is kind of trying to figure out new versions of them.
So let's talk about the customer, because you mentioned that. And we have had conversations about maybe we should do a customer survey, because it seems as though the consumer behavior is changing almost daily, because so many new things are happening via the internet, and that's changing consumer behavior. How do we, get back to getting a clearer understanding of what the customer really want, and staying on top of it, because it's clear that it's not going to be a fixed type situation, not anytime soon anyway.
Yeah, I mean, really, really smart retailers do their own research. And I think, trying to have them share that with you would be wonderful if that's possible. But I think, yeah, I am a researcher, so I believe very strongly in it. But I also believe that there are limits to really understanding the customer through a survey. And really that is because sometimes the customer doesn't know what they want. And they don't know it until they see it. And then they go, oh my God, that's fabulous,
Mhm.
So I think there is this, how are they changing? What are what is important to them? And then, how can we, 125th Street, the businesses on 125th Street, the cultural, all your cultural institutions, they have to do that as well. So how do we respond to that in a creative way? And sometimes it has to be a small test because it's too expensive to do a big one. But I think, yeah, always changing, always changing.
So going back to some of the problems we're having on the street, and government is working hard. This is why you see this more supportive housing, more programs for people with special needs. And one of the things that we've been saying is that there has to be some kind of strategic plan. It doesn't seem to be, any rhyme or reason of where these type facilities are placed. It's people sign a lease, I got a space and it's there. And how it impact others in the street. And I know by going to Washington, talking with some of our other colleagues, IDA again then brought people together. So this is something that's happening across the country. People are trying to address some of these problems, but there doesn't seem to be any strategic planning around how you incorporate these new services into commercial districts. And in many instances, it's deteriorating the health of the district. Have you dealt with any of your clients in this? Because we are struggling with that on 125th Street as well.
It is a struggle. It is definitely a struggle because sometimes things get put in places where they shouldn't be. But it's very hard to tell a private property owner that you forego, the rent on this because that shouldn't go there. So there isn't a solution, but I do think that having a kind of master plan and having people buy into that master plan is the first step in making that happen. But unfortunately, you cannot force people. It's really having them understand why foregoing this and saving the space for something else is good for them as well as for the district.
Okay, that's, it's not the answer that I wanted to hear, but it definitely sums up, the challenge that we have. And it also stresses the need that we have to keep working on it. So what about, you're working on updating our data now, and there's some good news and there's some bad news about what the data revealed. You want to give us a little bit of the good and a little bit of the bad?
Well, I like I said, I'm a researcher. So for me, data is neutral. And I think it's the community that decides whether it's positive or negative.
Okay.
And so I mean, certainly what we do know in terms of there is, from the good side, there are actually more people living in the trade area, which we designate as Upper Manhattan. So the 125th Street trade area is growing. So more people are living there, and the incomes are increasing as they go. There are fewer children, and that is common across the country. There are actually, the percentage of children is decreasing. What we do know is that there is a bounce back in terms of people on the street, which is not surprising. And Harlem has an amazing, if you compare 125th Street to almost anywhere outside of New York City, the actual numbers on the street are mind-boggling, but they have decreased, and they're not so they're bouncing back from COVID times, but they're not bouncing back to the same as they were, say, in the mid, say, 2015.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. What we do know from traffic counts is that and this comes out of COVID, people want to be in the stores, but they're spending less time in stores, and they come with a mission. So it's really trying to serve them well and have that there, and give them the option of buying online and in store. I think we talked about that previously. So
yeah, we did. So the retail mix on 125th Street, because often 125th Street is seen as basically just a shopping district. And we have offices, we have supportive services, we have government buildings, we have culture, but just the type of retail that we have, you know, from the study we're doing now, I don't think it's changed very much. Even we may have a lower amount of certain types, but it seems as though we still have the same type of businesses dating back from 2015. I just did a glimpse of the draft report you sent to me. Can you just let our listeners understand the type of retail that we have on 125th Street?
Well, I think the type of retail is what we call retail merchandise, which is people selling products. So a clothing store, you know, those kinds of things. Those are retail products. And so it's a relatively high percentage. A lot of bids are struggling to keep their product categories because you know they don't have the kind of footfall that 125th Street has. So that's the big one. There's lots of services, obviously, which is a very important part of serving the community. And so things like banks, which is financial services, but all the kind of the ways to help service residents, you know, essentially for the most part. And then also people who are going, you know, who work there need those services as well. And then there's food, but not a lot of restaurants. So there's fast food. There's lots of fast food, but not as many restaurants. I think the restaurants tend to be kind of around the corners,
Right.
on, you know, as opposed to right on 125th Street.
Correct. And exactly. And we've worked on that. There have been some restaurants that have come, and I'm not sure. I think there are a number of reasons why they haven't survived. One is most of them have gone to the second floor. I'm not sure that second floor thing is working yet. We probably need to do some more work on that. So, which brings us back, you've mentioned it a little bit, to the pedestrian counts. And you're right, our pedestrian counts were like averaging, I think it was 800 and some odd thousand a week. And we're now at 400 and some odd thousand people, pretty close to 500,000 now, which is not a small amount of people, you know, in 5 blocks, but it's still not where it used to be. And also you've done the subway ridership. I'm not sure, are those numbers up or down? Which brings again this whole thing of examining what it is we need to do to attract people to come back to 125th Street. So this is just laying out what I'm facing and to hear your response to that.
Yeah, well, you know, I think you're doing what needs to be done. So I think, you know, you are filling some of those vacancies up, which I think is really important. So a store like Sephora is going to bring people you know, from quite a distance away. I think they have a good, you know, what you're looking for are stores that are in sync with your values. So I think you know, Sephora is very good about valuing diversity. And I think that having those kinds of stores are as important as having some of the cultural, you know, you have these wonderful cultural amenities, and it's really, you know, creating that umbrella of the story around 125th Street and why, you know, why these stores are here and why more customers should come to the area. So it's definitely, you know, that's why marketing is so important, so people understand what is there and how it's changing. So just because somebody comes once and says, there's nothing here, I think it's really, staying in contact and really making sure that the message gets out is truly an important role for the bid.
Yes, and that brings in again the role of culture as a driving economic tool, and what you just said is incorporating that into the marketing of everything, because preserving the history is important to this community. And when you did the study before, you highlighted the opportunities for complementary businesses for culture, which would result into a creative industry and also help to spur business north and south, and east and west. And pulling all that together is very challenging because we are a small bid, but it also opens the door, which is what I want to close with, is into inclusion, diversity and inclusion in the retail mix, which is, everyone talks about it, how to bring small businesses, Black businesses. In Harlem, we like to say Black businesses as well, because when you say diversity, that can include a lot of races, but people who live here and have been here also want these opportunities. I proposed one thing to the city that didn't go through, which is to incentivize, give developers incentives for, the inclusion of diverse, small, Black, unique businesses. And I'm searching for, whether or not that has ever been done. Have you heard of it? And do you think it's a great idea?
I think it's a great idea, but it is really challenged, I will tell you, politically and legally. And unfortunately, there is this question about whether a political entity can subsidize a business. And that is, and it has, I hate to say it, it's important, but does get challenged. So what I think might be an idea, and this it just came to me off the top of my head, so was maybe look at businesses like Trader Joe's and like Sephora, who really have good diversity and inclusion programs, and find a way to work with them to bring in some of the smaller businesses in the neighborhood. I don't know if that is a kind of can become a reality, but they're all looking at how they do this, because it's not good enough just to say, oh yeah, we are, we can talk the talk. You got to walk the walk. You have to have those businesses in there. And I know that Sephora is very big on including in their supplier base Black-owned businesses. So,
and that might be a good, which you recommended, and we did create a real estate development committee. That may be a good topic for us to bring up, because in the long run, people come to this community because they are looking for, unique products that come from the Black community. Otherwise, they can stay where they are. They're looking for that uniqueness. So I think it's an opportunity for us to find a way to do it. But I'm starting this conversation right here with you. This is something we are seeking to do. So while you're out traveling around
now that we're on the record,
yes, now that you're on record, record. We-
We're now on the hook for this idea, aren't
We're,
we?
we're on the hook for this idea. I thank you so much, Maureen. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you, listeners. You are listening to 125th Street and Beyond. I'm Barbara Askins. My guest today is Maureen Atkinson, Senior Advisor and Research Insights for JC Williams Group in Toronto, Canada. Thank you, Maureen, once again for joining us. Tune in next Monday at 4 p.m. on 90.3 FM for 125th Street and Beyond. You can email me at bid125thst@aol.com.